Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Intercultural Insiders. My name is John McGraw, and I help expats and newcomers feel confident in their new country in less time and pain. I am the founder of Hyaku Coaching, and Hyaku Coaching is dedicated to helping you create your pathway to success in a new culture. The purpose of Intercultural Insiders is to share the stories of people with intercultural experiences. So if you're feeling isolated or lost, perhaps you can hear something from the guests' experiences that could help you, even if it's just to remind you that you're not alone. And I want to remind you that by rising to the challenge of adapting to another culture, we can become better versions of ourselves. And today is part 1 of an interview with Jesus Romero Palacio. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk about a recent experience that I had. I was asked by a community newcomer organization here in Toronto to run a workshop for the YES program. That's YESS, which is the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy to help newcomers, who are facing difficulties in adapting to the labor market, and not only newcomers, but youth from all sorts, but particularly newcomers, as we know, face some additional barriers when dealing with finding employment. So the workshop that I had planned focused on Canadian work culture expectations, especially in communication. Now, due to cultural and language differences, as we probably know, newcomers can sometimes unintentionally come across as rude by Canadian cultural standards, and this can lead to a lot of problems at work, including, in some extreme cases, being fired from their jobs. So I intended with this workshop to provide some insights to the attendees and give them a chance to practice making requests and getting their thoughts across in a manner that Canadians who were born and raised here would be more accustomed to, and to help them smooth their adaptation to their jobs and to the labor market. Now, I said intended because although there were several people who signed up, none of them actually showed up. So that was quite interesting. Now, Sam is my contact at the organization, and he apologized for the lack of attendance. And he told me that it was quite common that the attendance was lower than the registration for these events, particularly when working with youth. And, well, as many of us already know, ever since the pandemic, there's been a real gap that's developed between registrations for events and attendance. And I'd say this happens for both virtual events and live events. Although I have to admit, this was the first time that I went to one where no attendees showed up. So I could have left early, but instead I decided to stick around for the full time and got to know Sam a little better. He shared his experiences working in social services and working with newcomers in Canada and refugees in the United States. And he, of course, talked a little bit about his own experiences as a former newcomer to North America. And I shared my experiences being in Japan. And, well, I even gave him a quick run through of the workshop just so he could see what I had planned for the attendees. So after that, I went home. So that was the end of that. And then yesterday, I received an email from Sam. So Sam had spoken to his supervisor, and together they decided to ask me to run a workshop for the staff at the center about culture in the workplace. And he, of course, assured me that the staff would show up for this workshop. And I feel that that opportunity, getting that new opportunity highlights the importance of showing up in the right frame of mind. Now, when there were no attendees who came along, I could have gotten upset, but I decided to take advantage of the time and get to know Sam better and show him what I had come up with. So I feel that that positive attitude carried over and gave him the leverage to convince his supervisor to invite me back for a talk that would be targeted towards the staff. And since we're getting closer to the end of 2022, it's a great time to consider and reflect on how we want to show up in our lives, in different aspects of our lives. Do we want to get stuck in our frustrations and wrapped up in the negative stories that are going on in our heads, making negative assumptions about others? Or do we want to show up as our best selves and take decisive action? And I feel that it's essential to focus on the latter, because I'm not saying we need to ignore the negative things and the challenges that come up in our lives, but oftentimes when we get wrapped up in that, that can take over what we do. And when we're wrapped up in those stories, we often miss opportunities that spring up, or we maybe give across an impression that others don't want to offer those opportunities to us. So I think that being aware and just being open, as I tried to be in that situation, I think really can benefit us in many ways. And that brings me to some additional news from Hyaku Coaching. And this is aimed towards the newcomers here to Canada. Now, you've made a great step and started your first job in Canada, but once you've gotten the job, how do you advance and progress in a Canadian workplace? And the fact is that understanding the work culture is essential, because there are many invisible rules that Canadians won't explain because they assume everyone knows them. And of course, violating these invisible rules can slow down your career, or in extreme cases, result in losing your job. So what do you do? Well, in 2023, Hyaku Coaching is launching a group coaching program for ambitious newcomers to Canada who want to create their roadmap to success after getting their first job. And this is called the Canadian Success Group Coaching for Newcomers. And what do you get? There's a wait list that's available. So what do you get from that? By signing up to this wait list, you get the latest updates about the Canadian Success Group Coaching for Newcomers program, as we said, launching in early 2023. So what will be included in the program is a one-to-one discovery call. There's an intercultural development inventory report to help you measure your cross-cultural communication skills, and a personal debrief that goes with that, 6 bi-weekly group coaching sessions, and up to 3 optional one-to-one laser coaching calls. And I wanted to emphasize that there's no cost to join the wait list and no commitment to join the program. But by joining the wait list, of course, you'll get the latest updates and latest news about that. And you'll also get access to a special discount. So there's really no reason not to join the wait list. And by doing that, you get some extra information. And again, there's no commitment to join the program once the price is announced or by joining the wait list, but you do get access to that discount. And spaces are limited, so I recommend getting your spot now. And if you are interested in learning more, I encourage you to go to the Hyaku Coaching website at thriveglobally.ca. And if you want to, you can also email me directly at johnmcgraw@thriveglobally.ca, or find me on LinkedIn if you're watching me here on LinkedIn. So that brings us to our first guest, our guest for today, rather, Jesus Romero Palacio, who is a project manager for a nonprofit organization, a professor, a coach, and also a newcomer to Canada. This is part one of a two-part interview. And some of the highlights from this, it's a really, to me, is a really inspirational interview because, as I said, he's a newcomer to Canada, someone who is highly skilled, lots of experience, and to have the courage to start over, leaving his life in Colombia and relocating here to Canada really takes a lot of courage. And that really is inspirational. And some of the highlights that are in the interview I want to mention is that he talks about developing his English skills, his passion for solving problems and how he applies it to his life, and the importance of adapting in a multicultural environment such as Canada. Now, Jesus is attending in the chat, so he will be available to answer questions that you might write in the chat throughout the interview and the rest of the program. So I encourage you to write your questions, your comments to him. I, of course, will also be available in the chat as well. So again, making this another interactive episode, as all of the episodes of Intercultural Insiders are. Really looking forward to showing you this and to hear your thoughts. So, without further wait, let's start with that interview with Jesus Romero Palacio. Jesus, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Okay, thank you so much, John, for this invitation. I'm Jesus. I'm from Colombia, from the city of Shakira, Barranquilla, and Sofia Vergara too. I live here in Toronto, in Canada. I moved here 1 year and 3 months ago. Currently working as a project manager for a non-profit organization. Currently learning a lot of things about the culture, the people around me to adapt myself easier.
I want to acknowledge the fact that you have taken on this challenge to come to Canada. What led you to becoming a project manager?
This is an interesting question because I become project manager accidentally. My first job was in my university. I participated in a project. In that time, I didn't know about the difference between project or something like that. But I realized the life is a project, and we are always living or developing different kind of projects. Because of that, I love project management and also product management too, because the product is the final result of a project. A project is a series of activities you need to do, you need to develop to achieve a goal, a final result, a desired result. And because of that, I'm passionate about that. It's about solving problems. Project management and product management is about solving problems. I'm passionate about innovation and technology. I have a certification in project management. I may have the PMP certification. I belong to the PM chapter, the Toronto chapter. I have been certified maybe 6 or more years. I studied product management too. I have a master's degree in engineering management. I'm electronic engineering, but now I'm passionate about data science because I realize this is a powerful tool to solving problems, developing different kind of projects and products. I have fellowship from Correlation One. The program is Data Science for All. I applied 3 times, and in my third attempt, I passed. And now I'm study this intensive and practical study focus on data science. Data science is all related to take decisions, create projects or products, focus on data using machine learning and artificial intelligence too. So when I arrived here in Canada, it's like a challenge. This is an excellent opportunity to grow, to connect with others because the networks here are maybe powerful than in my country. But I think my main challenge was my speaking skills. When I arrived here, I was working in a fantastic project. We impact more than 1,000 businesses in Colombia. So in that time, I need to work here remotely. And for me, it was very challenging. And after that, it's okay. I need to begin to know the ecosystem here. And I get this job in this non-profit organization as a project manager.
I'm hearing so many things. Your passion for solving problems, your interest in innovation and technology, your persistence, because you applied 3 times to get into that particular program and you kept going, your passion for solving problems. How does that connect to the challenges that you're facing here with life in Canada?
This is an interesting question because I think our life is about solving problems through developing different type of projects to get these final results. So in my country, I have other roles as trainer, professor, and something like that. But here is at the beginning, try to understand what I want. It's not about, oh, I need a job. It's what kind of job. What is your final desired result? This is okay, what I want. Because if I don't know what I want, I can focus. And sometimes my mind is go quickly and sometimes change. And I realize I need to breathe to see the whole picture. I try to understand my current reality as an immigrant. At first, try to understand me because this is a new challenge in my life. I have a lot of change in my life. When I was a kid, I moved out from my home at 19 years old. It's like I feel something like that. It's a challenge. And this opportunity to me is try to understand the situation, try to understand my current role. And if I understand my current role, the thing that I want, this gives me focus to translate the situation into a problem. If I can translate the situation into a problem, I can create this project or something like that. This is about what desired result I need to achieve, the thing that I want, because in my country sometimes I live in the mode not I want, is in the mode I need. It's different. The focus is different because one thing is an obligation and the other is like a freedom. So here is okay. The speed here is different than in my country. The culture is different, and for example, the communication is a key aspect for me always because I love communicate with others. I need to improve my communication skills. So I think this is a other thing that I learned here is okay, one problem at a time. Because sometimes I try to achieve different goals at the same time. It's okay. I could feel a little overwhelming because it's okay. There are a lot of tasks to do, or there are a lot of goals to achieve at the same time. And it's okay, one goal at a time.
What would you say is the one goal or one project that you need to focus on most right now?
The data science program that I'm currently studying, I think is now my mainly focus. But our life is not about one thing. Other focus is my current job, of course. Another focus is in my relationships with my wife, try to understand the culture, try to create valuable relationships here. I consider myself like an introvert. So if I improve my communications skills, if I understand the culture, I can create a valuable relationship here. And because of that, I accept this interview.
And I want to really acknowledge you taking on this challenge of doing this interview, because I think that more people need to hear your story, your situation, and the fact that you are willing to share that in English is really something. You mentioned that people communicate a little differently here than in Colombia. So I'm curious, before you came to Canada, what kinds of differences did you expect? And what was the reality like?
When I was in my country, I saw Canada. Maybe the people here are very different in terms of relationships, but I didn't know why. When I arrived here, I understand something. It's the multicultural aspect, and mainly here in Toronto. I never saw or live in a place where maybe there are more than 5 or 10 people from different countries, or not only countries, in different cities. For example, in my country, the people who live in at south part is totally different the culture from the people in the north part. So when I arrived, I have a big challenge because For me, try to understand the culture here is not general thing. I believe there is a general culture in terms of Canada, but I think maybe here in Toronto is totally different than Vancouver. The main thing that I didn't realize or is different to know than experience is about the multicultural aspect. Maybe this person is the second generation of immigrants or the first generation. In my country, I have never been in a multicultural environment. I traveled to United States, but United States is different because Miami is very similar to my original city, Barranquilla, because there are a lot of Latin persons here. I think one important aspect that I realized is, and the common thing in all of us is because all of us, we are immigrants or our parents were immigrants too. Nobody here except First Nations. All of us are immigrants. And this kind of discrimination that we can see in other countries here is not frequently. I feel more safe when I speak in English because it's okay. All of us are immigrants. Don't judge others because all of us are equal. You speak maybe not perfectly with the perfect grammar, but if you try to express yourself, if you express and the people understand you, it's okay. Go to the point and express yourself.
The important part is communicating the message, not about perfect grammar or having an accent like someone who was born and raised here. And we all have accents. So as long as you are understood, that is what matters. I completely agree. And you mentioned an interesting point that you're going to encounter multiple cultures in a business environment. So it just shows the importance of being able to understand and adapt. It's not like you can just have a list of, okay, you do this and don't do that in Canadian culture, because, okay, that can be useful in some places, but what about when you have coworkers from India or from China or from Colombia or wherever? And depending on if they are first generation or second generation, there are so many different aspects of culture. It's not just country, like you said, it's the region, it's the city where they're from, it's their generation. Rather than having just a list of tips, it's important to have that mindset to be aware of culture, and then it makes it easier to adapt to any situation. Since you have come to Canada, what would you say are some of the most important things that you have learned?
I think one of the most important aspect for me is the capacity to learn. And sometimes it's okay, I'm not perfect, but I always have the ability to choose. If I choose or I take a decision, this decision have a consequence. If you move to a new country as an immigrant, your problems doesn't disappear. No, your inner problems appears maybe here in other forms, in other ways. For example, for me, if I see that I can't communicate, I think it's okay because for me the problem is an opportunity. It's not a bad thing. Thanks of the problem, I'm here. The attitude is very important, and our capacity to adapt ourselves to different situations, as you said before, because the environment, life is not impossible, it's complex. We are not a equation in algebra. We have our variables. So we need to understand that our life is about adaptations. It's not about a manual. Or I like that. It's not about tip one, 3 tips two. No, because the reality is different. Every reality. So I think our capacity to adapt and learn is very important.
There's an opportunity to learn, and seeing problems as opportunities. It's a learning journey that never ends. What you said about that there's no manual, right? There's nothing that you can just follow that's going to necessarily work. Or it may work for some people, but it might not necessarily work for you. So being able to find what works for you is, well, it's exciting. And also when you choose something that fits best with you, then you'll have the best results. So that was part one of the interview with Jesus. And again, it's great to have him in the chat to answer questions and comments. Some of the things that really stood out for me, and please feel free to comment in the chat as well about your own thoughts. Again, the idea that there's no specific, well, when you're coming to Canada, obviously some tips can be useful to help you adapt in the short term. But because, as was mentioned, Canada is a multicultural environment, and all the workplaces, especially in the larger cities, are multicultural. And let's face it, we're in a more global environment in the world wherever you're working virtually, you are communicating with people from all over the world. So having that understanding of, I think that understanding of your own culture and who you are, rather than as Jesus said, tip one, tip two, right? It's having a greater understanding of who you are and how your own cultural biases and your cultural upbringing affects your thinking. That really has a greater impact on how you can show up when you are in a new environment. So I just wanted to highlight that. That was very exciting. So, and again, a lot of the comments, just the idea that Jesus mentioned about seeing, as he said, life is a constant problem. Whole life is a constant problem to solve every day. I love that. I love that. Again, project manager's brain, as I commented earlier. So before we finish up, of course, we have part two coming up next week, and I'll show a little more information about that. But I also wanted to mention that I am associated with Brilliant Minds Group, BMG, and they have, again, the end of the year celebration coming up, a community collaboration and contribution event at the Pearl Banquet Hall in Mississauga on Saturday, December 17th, 2022. Brilliant Minds Group is, again, focused on helping newcomers and international students to thrive in Canada. And there will be many influential industry leaders there. So it's a great opportunity to network, and there'll be food and I think various entertainment. I understand that there is a famous television host that's also going to be running the event. So it's going to be a great event to attend. Very exciting. So for more information about that, I recommend you can find Brilliant Minds Group, BMG, on LinkedIn. And also you can contact Dinesh Sharma and Shahzad Gadwani on LinkedIn to find out more information about that. And also, as I mentioned, of course, next time is part two of the interview with Jesus. And he will talk a little bit more. He mentioned a brief bit, but he'll expand more on the strengths of being an introvert when networking, the connection between language and identity, and the importance of having a greater purpose when pursuing goals. So I encourage you to turn up for that. And that is going to be the final episode of 2022. But I recommend showing up for that last episode because there will also be some extra information about news, some exciting news coming up, not just for Hyaku coaching, but for the show as well, and Intercultural Insiders and how it's going to look in 2023. So I encourage you to show up for that. And of course, you can always watch on YouTube on demand. And there will be other ways to access the show. But of course, we'll mention that later on next week in the final episode of 2022 and the second part of this really inspirational interview with Jesus. So until then, keep navigating your way between cultures towards your goals. So thank you very much. And yes, thank you, Jesus, for the great conversation. It was great having you on here, and looking forward to showing the second part of that as well. So until then, everyone stay safe and keep navigating your way between cultures towards your goals.